Well, Bob, if it's okay with you, I'll just kind of jump in how I normally introduce this podcast. And honestly, the way I'd like to run this podcast is I don't do a lot of prep because I like to just let it be organic and, authentic, vulnerable with folks that come on. And so the name of my podcast, and to folks listening, is The Exorcist Within. And I am a mental health counselor, provisionally licensed. This is a second career for me. And I am also, I love horror movies. And so it's a special interest of mine. And so I really enjoy combining the two. So usually I'll suss out mental health themes or psychological themes out of horror movies and kind of relate to how that helps people heal, or it's helped me heal. And actually doing this podcast has helped me do a lot of healing by being able to understand my own trauma journey through the lens of horror. I've had guests come on that do the same. And even the name The Exorcist Within is inspired by your work in a lot of ways, by thinking about like how the self has the capacity to heal no matter what.
Mhm.
And I know so much about your work. Jonah has mentored me in IFS. I'm not formally trained. Everything I know is from Jonah and from my own personal deep dive and my own personal therapy.
Mhm.
And so, again, I don't have an agenda, but what I was kind of hoping to do today is maybe a couple things. I know most of the people that are probably used to coming on this podcast are going to be folks that are not as familiar with IFS, not as familiar with unattached burdens, spirituality, your work, but they are going to be very familiar with how horror does portray spirituality through film, obviously psychological themes through film, but that's okay. But I guess maybe it would be great if you could start out by introducing who you are and just anything you would like the audience to know about yourself.
Okay. Um, I'm Bob. I'm an old man, an old fart living on a mountainside in California. And I got into therapy because I needed so much healing myself. I come from one of those families that was a horror movie, real life horror movie. And it looked good on the outside if you didn't get close. Middle class, we went to church every Sunday, but I was raped and beaten almost every day of my childhood. And I was molested by my father, my mother, my older brother, and most of the time, my father had at least one of his gay lovers, child molesting friends living in the house with the family. So they also raped me and my brother. And he was into S&M, so it was extremely brutal. And they were both addicts, prescription drugs, dad more alcohol. Mom was institutionalized a few times when I was a kid. My brother died in a probably suicidal accident when I was a teenager. My father was murdered a few years later. It wasn't me. I was over 1,000 miles away with lots of witnesses. It was not me. And by all odds, I should be dead like my brother, living in a dumpster or in prison. There's sort of a joke, but it's not a joke because it's not funny. Women who are abused go to therapy, men go to prison.
Yeah,
That's just too damn accurate. But if you don't start finding humor in this, you just spend your whole life crying.
absolutely.
So I do both. Pretty much now in my late 70s, I'm happier, more creative and productive than I've ever been. And I do laugh and cry almost every day. I was headed toward addiction. I was headed like a railroad train going down a steep hill towards severe alcoholism. And I met LSD in 1967. And that derailed the train. Thank God. There have been times since then I've abused alcohol, but never with that same addictive drive and compulsivity. So I tried every form of therapy known to humanity. Some of them are very damaging. A lot of them were wonderful. And there are a whole bunch of what are generically referred to as parts work models. There are models of psychotherapy based on the realization that our mind is not one thing. It's actually a system of interrelated smaller parts. Works best if we work with these parts as if they were all people and we treat them with that respect and curiosity. In internal family systems, we say it's an internal family. There are many, many of these. Gestalt therapy from Esalen, ego state therapy developed by Jack and Helen Watkins, psychosynthesis, voice dialogue, transactional analysis, Pia Melody's post-induction therapy, and there's more. Those are just the really good ones, I think.
Yeah.
And I think IFS is the best of the bunch. Pia Melody does some stuff that IFS doesn't do, and other things have important voices to add to the choir. I think IFS is the best. It's the most potent because it's the most respectful. I didn't
Absolutely.
used to put the words respect and potency together, but I do now. And the IFS method respects the integrity of the system. It's a very complex ecosystem. You don't just go in there and blast through the protective, or what other therapies would call the defensive parts. You you negotiate with them and get their agreement before you go working with all the tender stuff. And this is actually much more potent. It allows us to have deeper influence on the system, and therapy proceeds much more quickly and deeply when it's done from kindness rather than force.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's the basis. That's our floor for today,
Yes, sir.
and
Great.
I've gone way beyond the basis. What I realized is as you go in and you meet all these parts and you develop relationships with them, and the internal system or family or whatever you call it starts to become pretty healthy, and they get along. I mean, every family has fights, but they're not trying to kill each other anymore, which is a big improvement from I think most of us go around this planet in a state of internal civil war, and we burn up most of our creative energy fighting ourselves to the death. And I view therapy as turning this into something like a great choir or a jazz band or whatever kind of music you like, a great orchestra.
Mhm.
And it releases so much more energy. We become so much more creative and joy based rather than fear and hate based. Anyway, that's just the baseline here, gang.
Yeah.
For you people, I want to go to the weird stuff.
Yes, we actually talked about that. It's like, we wanna go to the weird stuff, absolutely.
Okay.
I
So
appreciate that.
with that as the baseline, as you go in there, you meet all these parts. And then you keep going, it gets weirder and weirder. Beyond the parts, there are things that you could call legacy burdens or ancestral traces. And these are things that did not happen in your own personal lifetime, but they have profound impact on who you are and how you feel. There is irrefutable scientific evidence that these things exist. The Holocaust studies, Rachel Yehuda, they've done this with rats. They can do it with rats. And that's now the standard of reality in our world. If you can do it with people, it doesn't matter so much. But if you can make rats do it, it's real. So this stuff is real. And even the most hard minded materialist, you trot out all the science. Yep, these things are real. Stuff that's not in your own personal history can have profound effects on who you are and how you feel. You keep going, there's other stuff in there that has profound effects on who you are and how you feel, that's not from your own personal history and it's not from your ancestors. This is the stuff Dick calls unattached burdens and guides. The traditional phrase for this, and Dick is the founder of IFS, Richard Schwartz, Dr. Richard Schwartz. Everybody calls him Dick. He hates it when I say this, but this is what's traditionally called spirit possession. And that you want to freak out a modern day psychotherapist, you try suggesting spirit possession as a serious understanding of a client they're dealing with. That they will, the reaction won't be pleasant. Let's put it that way. Vast majority of the time. I have a little bit of graduate work in my undergraduate degrees in anthropology, and it's totally respectable to talk about spirit possession in that field. So what I say and what helps most people get over their initial startle response, yuck, is there is some kind of basic psychological dynamic that we have records of in almost every culture we know anything about and in almost every era of history. This biopsychological dynamic can have profound effects on people, both for good or for ill. The metaphor most often used to describe this is spirit possession. But no matter what metaphor we use, it's worthy of serious study. It's everywhere and it's very powerful. And most people will at least let the door crack open a little tiny bit. And that's the stuff for the past 10, 15 years, that's primarily what I've worked with.
Yeah. I want to frame up a couple just for the horror movie audience that might be listening. A few movies that came out in the last couple years. There's a movie that came out last year called The Life of Chuck, written by Stephen King. The tagline for this movie, Bob, was "We contain multitudes." I saw that and I was like, wow, Stephen King gets it. And then Mike Flanagan, who made the movie. And then there's a movie that came out last year called Exuma, which is a Korean movie about cultural burdens, spirit possession, and the shamans come in and do these really elaborate ceremonies to not only exorcise this spirit, but also a Japanese spirit that comes in, which came in through the land because of Japanese invasion of the country, occupation of the country for so long. And I know that you know a lot about this as well because of, just from what I've known about your material and your family.
Right.
And these are perfect examples of how possession, spirit, in a really relatable way to audiences and people can connect to. And like you said, we are the Western culture. We're so used to seeing spirit possession, just beating it out of people, and from the Catholic tradition. And I got to say, Bob, one thing that I really love about your work, and this is one of your books, Within Us. You have this amazing. It's so well researched, and so you talk about how this is not a new idea. It is well researched. And if anyone is interested out there, I highly recommend The Others Within Us. And I have so many books just to go through that you've referenced in this book to just go through and look through your research because it's absolutely incredible to just the work you've done to trace back through history, the work that's already been done on this, the research, it just feels undeniable. The evidence is undeniable.
I think so. And one reason I wrote that book that way, it took me 10 years to write that book, by the way. And
Feels
there's a 32-page research bibliography, and I actually read all that stuff because I felt this is such an unacceptable idea to most modern Westerners that I really have to compile a very, very powerful case just to get them to go, might be possible. And so that's what I set out to do. My wife is Korean, which you made reference to, and I hardly ever watch movies, which makes it somewhat ironic that I'm on this show. My father was a movie maker. He worked for MGM.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I don't like movies. Also, I worked as a motion picture projectionist, getting through college. And one time I had to watch a Doris Day Rock Hudson movie like 280 times. And that would turn almost anyone off to film.
Understandable, considering the history, for sure.
Koreans have an amazing shamanic tradition that most people don't know anything about, the mudang. And they're overwhelmingly women. And the men who do it often cross-dress and put on makeup when they're doing the ceremonies. And they have very elaborate, very specific ways of dealing with these spirits and helping them move on. They believe, as I do, that the vast majority of these spirits are lost souls. They're not some, something weird from somewhere else. They're the souls of deceased humans that are lost and are sticking around here and have not been able to go on for one reason or another. In the Korean world, the Korean shamanic worldview, the number one reason is injustice. They have a special name for this emotion, Han, injustice, pain. But it doesn't include vengeance. So there's no equal category in English. Han, they say these spirits are here because they have Han. So what they do is the mudangs go into trance, meet the spirits, and witness the spirit's suffering so that the spirit feels seen, and then the spirit can go on to where it needs to be. And that's the number one technique they use to relieve the suffering of when spirits become attached to a person.
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading just to kind of talk about your other new book for a second. You just released this new book, Spirit, and I've been going through it, and it's absolutely amazing, the message. And I've actually done a little exercise in this myself, just what you're doing to communicate with spirit, and it really is powerful. It's so powerful. And there's some of the messages that I was reading that you receive dialoguing with spirit. One of the messages was that there are no pure evil beings, and what you're talking about that and even in this movie, going back to this movie Exuma, is they say in the movie that they're just seeking the light, and it's not from a vengeful place. They're just seeking the light, and I know that's what you've talked about in a lot of your work, your experience working with these unattached burdens or burdens, is that helping them move towards that light is the way. Versus what we're used to seeing in, traditional exorcism movies, right?
Yeah. I think traditional exorcisms and Protestant deliverances, and the Church of England formally recognizes exorcism and deliverance, and that they have their own standards, which are quite interesting. I think the big mistake is they fight these things. These negative or malevolent spirit beings like fighting. They love fighting. That's their ballpark. They want you to fight them. If you approach them with kindness, compassion, and respect, and just let them know, I see you're lost and suffering. A lot of times they go, I'm not suffering. I'm a powerful being and I will destroy you. Ah! I just say something like, well, no, a lot of people believe that, but I know better and you know better.
Yeah.
Let's be honest and real with each other.
Jonah and I were talking about this.
I guess the first thing that's coming up right now as you're talking is like, as this is a podcast about the genre of horror, some of what I'm hearing you say, Bob, is sort of like some of what your commitment is to is switching the genre through which we view kind of spirit as like, let's take it away from the horror genre. Let's bring it to these other places, including comedy.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of your pitches away.
Yeah. They want us in horror. One of the things, I think a big issue is classically been called discernment. How do you tell the actual real benevolent good guide spirit contact from the nasties? The classical way in the Bible, by their fruits you shall know them. That is the gold standard. That's the real test. But it only works in hindsight. You got to let them mess around with you until they produce some fruits, which is kind of a problem sometimes. So I've been working hard to try and develop real-time tools of discernment.
Ah.
And the number one I think is if you meet some entity like this inside yourself, how does it respond to your fear? Pokes at that fear and tries to use that fear to manipulate you or to get you into being defensive and to engage with it in a fear-based power kind of relationship. That's not a friend. That is not a friend. The guide energies or benevolent energies, if they sense you're frightened, they will almost always back off respectfully and wait for your permission and invitation to come into your system. That's really a first line, because you typically see that when you meet these entities. That's one of the very first things that's obvious. And a lot of people meet these things by hearing voices. And hearing voices used to be considered, oh, you hear voices, you're schizophrenic, you're going to get locked up. And it was really, really bad for a long time. And now there's a group called the Hearing Voices Network, which is a wonderful group of people who work with people who've survived psychiatric treatment. And they just say, you can have whatever attitude you want toward the voice. It doesn't mean you're crazy. And again, if you look at human history, the majority of humans hear voices at some time. Socrates, the origin of Western philosophy, heard voices his whole life and based his life decisions on the voices he heard. Joan of Arc saved France from being conquered because she heard voices and listened to them. It goes on and on and on.
And we revere those people.
You just think, oh, hearing voices, you're nuts. Or another study that really touched me, they studied couples who'd been living together at least 45 years and one spouse had died. 80% of the surviving spouses hear the voice of the deceased spouse. That's normative human behavior. This is not signs of pathology or illness. It is normative. And still, in some places, they lock people up when they say, oh, I'm hearing voices. This is terrible.
But I was so happy that I had known about your work and kind of came to this point of view as my dad suffered from dementia, and in his final days he started, I just really learned to talk to him. I know you have the example you talk about often of work meeting people who are in quote psychosis with word salad, just like speaking their language. And I spent the last few days with my dad, and I would just whatever he was talking about, I would just talk with him. And in his final day, I was with him. He was talking to my mom and saying that she was there eating ice cream with us. I was like, "Oh, great! What ice cream is she? What flavor?" You know, just really being there with him in that moment. And it really, I think, oh man, I'm so grateful to have been able to do that
Great.
because of learning this and really believing in it.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
You know, Jamie, as you're talking, like I'm just noticing that fear, right? Where you could have this kind of old script of going to your dad with this fear of what the word salad means, right? But like kind of lowering your fear response and just leaning in.
Yeah,
And
Mhm.
you got to meet him there. You didn't have to lose him before you lost him
yeah,
because we were able to do that.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
And we can enter other worlds and have incredible experiences when we open ourselves up with that kind of heart-centered curiosity.
I'm wondering, as we were thinking about this podcast, like somewhere in the intersection of your work and of my own experience with psychedelics, I have kind of gotten this thought about the sort of the spectrum between terror and awe. And I remember thinking about like my first psychedelic experience. Like I closed my eyes and I saw these teeth and these eyes that were monster teeth and monster eyes. And I remember just being like, I don't fucking understand why I'm not afraid. Like, how is this the most beautiful experience of my life right now? These monster teeth, these monster eyes. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about not just from the kind of like the theoretical angle, but sort of like your own subjective experience of terror and awe, maybe when you meet these parts in your own system, or not parts, when you meet these beings in your own system or when you meet them in your work.
Yeah, there's a lot here. One of the things they used to say in Gestalt land or in the Gestalt universe was anxiety is excitement unsupported by breath.
Shout out Marion, our colleague Marion, went to the Gestalt Institute.
These are they're close, and awe is very close to terror. And confusion, which most people experience as a very negative state, is it's right next door to curiosity, which I think is the great panacea in doing early inner work. If you're truly curious about something, whatever you move towards goes well, pretty much. So my own experiences, yeah, I've experienced terror. I've had flashbacks to my childhood and all this truly horrible stuff. The parts work model really helps here. Who we really are, the self, the core of our being, is never afraid. It's like the sun on a really, really stormy day. You can't see it because there are all these clouds of the terrified parts and the angry parts and all these fighting parts in front. But when all those clouds settle back, the sun, the self, which is our witness function, which I think is, also the inflow place of the divine into us, but that's theoretical stuff we don't really need. That's undamaged, can't even be made dirty, no matter what kind of trauma you've been through. So when you are terrified, that means a part of you has hijacked your whole system. So the way I work with that is I don't try and put that part in a basement dungeon and shut it up and play loud music so nobody hears the screams, which is basically what we're trained to do in this culture. I get all the other parts to unblend for me so I can be in self, this loving, curious, compassionate place, and I go to the part who's terrified with curiosity and love. And then I just stay with that part until it can connect to the self well enough so it's not scared anymore before I go on further. Now, this is a very different way of dealing with fear than like white knuckling through, or anything like that. It looks kind of slow, but it's actually much quicker. This is what I meant before about, a respectful method being actually faster and more powerful. Does that answer your question?
Sure. I mean, I guess maybe where the curiosity comes up in response to your answer, my own curiosity comes up as like, when you say you have flashbacks, when you say that stuff like that comes up with your own terror in session or in doing the work. Uh, Not that I want to understand more of your terror per se.
Glad to share it with you.
I guess as you encounter things that look, kind of quote unquote objectively terrifying, obviously you're coming to us from this place where, just sort of somehow you just said that was like, it did seem almost simple. It did seem, well, I just turn to my part and I help them out and then we get back to the work. And I
Yeah.
know that honestly, mental health kind of is sort of boring when you described it almost in a way. You're like, I have a feeling and I respond to it and I'm back and I'm ready to do the work. But maybe sort of, were there periods before where you would encounter unattached burdens and like just the terror was all you could be in and like kind of the overwhelm in that terror? Did you go through that?
I have gone through that, but not for a long time. And again, overwhelm is a responsible part.
Hmm.
And because I've spent, I don't know, 40 years working with my parts, we have a pretty friendly system in here. So usually they're willing to separate from me, separate from self, so that self can be there with them and they're not left alone with that horrible feeling anymore. And that's a huge difference. If all you're feeling is overwhelm, it's really down the tubes. But if you're feeling overwhelmed and there's some larger, kind, compassionate being there with you, that's a whole different ballpark. Whole different ballpark.
One of the things that I noted down from the book Spirit was Spirit gave you some words to study fear and really think about what it meant for you. And it goes back to that old phrase of healing is a journey, not a destination. And so this is it takes years, it sounds like, to get. I mean, I know for me, I'm 38. It's taken a long time to get where I am today, and this is a journey to get to this point. I'm just thinking, out loud.
I actually think it takes many lifetimes.
Oh, yeah.
Here you
Yeah.
go.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, I wanted to circle back to that too, because you were talking about the self is where the inflow
Mhm.
of spirit comes in, and we are spiritual people, and I think Mila, so that we're totally open to exploring that topic for sure. But on that topic, I want to talk a little bit about Dick for just a second, if that's okay. I
Mhm.
noted, and this is just my observation, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I noticed in previous books, like The Others Within Us, Dick wrote the foreword, or I think he wrote an intro to it. And in Spirit, it seems, I forget what the language was, but my impression was there was a little bit more of a separation of maybe this book from IFS, or maybe it was, or something like that. And I do often hear you say, hey, Dick may not like this, or Dick may not agree with this. And I got to say, Bob, I really like your 12-year-old troublemaking part. I really dig that part.
Yeah.
And I guess that just makes me curious to know more about if this 12-year-old would like to tell us more about this, about your feelings towards,
Get him going.
like, how like you're separating yourself. It seems, anyways, can you speak to that, I guess?
Yeah. When I told Dick I was writing the book, The Others Within Us, he tried to prevent me.
Yeah.
He didn't want this material made public. He said, people will make fun of IFS if they know that we do this stuff, and I don't want this stuff out in the public except to level 3 trainees and more advanced people because it's too weird. And he got very strong in the way he was trying to do that, and it was a very difficult change in our relationship. Because before that, we'd co-authored a book and we're doing all sorts of stuff together. Eventually, he changed his mind. He wrote a foreword. He was somewhat, well, he was not enthusiastic. So I want now, because, I want success for Dick. So I don't want any of the really weird stuff I get involved with being used to discredit him. If you don't like what I'm saying, that's weird, Bob. You know, it, don't blame it on IFS or Dick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, a lot of the stuff I do does not really fit in the IFS worldview. It's sort of like I take the IFS parts model systemic thinking about the nature of the human mind as a baseline, and I go several steps beyond it into meeting all these spirit possession, both good and bad, and also to the idea of porosity of mind, that our minds are not isolated individual phenomena. And Dick doesn't really go there, I don't think. But you'd have to ask him. Let's put it that way. It's not a big IFS thing.
Mm.
We had, and I don't want this to sound too cheap, but like as we had been talking about this, there was the kind of phrase a little bit of like, does Bob seem a little haunted by Dick's skepticism or Dick's paranoia? Because I think that it's maybe not to get, too psychoanalytical, but we've kind of seen that sort of like snag for you. And thank you for just talking a little bit more about it, because it's like, right, of course, you want what's best for him. And then there get to be these moments where you're like, and I got to do what's best for me. And sorry, like this is where we're just kind of, the branches are going to grow apart a little bit.
Yeah. And we've managed to negotiate that in a way that's friendly but distant now, whereas before we used to be very, very close. And that negotiation was a painful process.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with us, Bob. When you say painful, it's like I can imagine because touched on something there. I want to circle back to something if that's okay. You were talking earlier about your story, your childhood trauma story. I certainly can't relate to all of it, but I was raised by a mom who was addicted to prescription pills and a dad who drank, and I have my own set of childhood trauma. And even in your books, you talked about recovering, through hypnotherapy, 12 steps. For me, that, and then IFS was sort of like the next big, huge step that like has changed my life. I'm still, still healing. It's a journey. I'm wondering, when you talk about, as you talk about and you relay your story now, do you have parts that come up for you around sharing that story so openly?
Not so much anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes some aspects of it are still very much alive for me. The actual trauma part, the rapes and the beatings and all of that, that's pretty much I can just talk about that. But what has been very difficult for me lately is what it was like to be a kid with no human who knew what my life was like. And the only people I could go to were the people who were abusing me, and how terribly, terribly lonely and how painful that loneliness and isolation. And I was kind of a weird kid, which it totally makes sense considering. So the kids at school didn't like me either. So nobody liked me. And I was always felt like the reject and, the outsider. And just so that's something that's been more alive for me lately. I also think, and this is an idea again beyond IFS. When people are raped, they almost literally get these negative spirits injected into them.
Mm.
And any kind of abuse that's intense enough to drive a person's awareness out of their body, that opens up the gateways to these negative beings. So I think that's also a major, major factor. And that's a truly horrible thing, but I think it's true.
Yeah, the act of dissociating, leaving your body, leave space for something else to come in.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You're vacating the stage. And so this,
Yeah.
nature loves a vacuum.
I want to say something else because I don't. I'm actually very optimistic about the state of the world and the state of humans, even though the way I see it, these negative beings are running the planet. They're in charge of the governments. They're in charge of the churches. They're in charge of the universities. They're running all that crap.
Feeling that.
Just to cheer you right up.
Yeah.
I'm still basically optimistic. And here's why. I think the only way people change is one at a time, deep in their consciousness, by transforming their systems and allowing these greater energies to flow into them. And that's a slow process. And this left me in a state of despair you know, we're doing this stuff one at a time with people, and these idiots or these possessed people can go and destroy thousands at a whack, or 100,000 at a whack. That's But Ian McGilchrist, who I think is one of the greatest minds on the planet today, he said, we don't have to change 50% or 51%. We only need to change about 3% or even less. Because when people make these kinds of profound, deep changes of consciousness, it's incredibly contagious, and it can spread through the world and radiate like ripples or heat. So if you really start to believe we only need 2 or 3%, then just doing our work one at a time, helping the people who are right in front of us, staying with this kind of love, light, warmth, curiosity-based healing can and will change the whole planet. And Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, I don't know, 70 years ago, said, never doubt that a small group of people, dedicated people, can change the entire course of a culture. It's the only thing that has.
Wow.
So I'm optimistic in this world that is a hell realm.
I don't even know if I have words for just like what happened. I just got chills and like got teary because I work with a lot of populations that are marginalized and are really concerned about the state of the world. I mean, I am too. I have a lot of privilege. And as a therapist, as a, provisionally licensed therapist coming up, often, and I know I'm not alone in this, is like, well, what the hell can I do? Like it feels like, but I do have this philosophy of, and I even kind of work with my clients around this, is like, it matters what you do, because you're going to pass this kindness and curiosity to others, and they're going to pass it on. And I share this optimism as well. And what you're saying is just feels so valid, and I see that vision. And that's something else that you're talking about. It really taps into this idea that I feel like I've always kind of known, and then I think you were the first person that I ever heard speak to. We've also talked about is this idea of collective consciousness being kind of like higher power, or being a greater thing. And I think that the more people we get tapped into that, there's so powerful. I'm not using my words well, but it's so powerful, Bob. Yes, yes.
Good, wonderful.
Just there were a lot of tears for you, Jake.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
Yeah, and we don't need to like slow down too much to be with the tears, but it felt like there was something really meaningful, and maybe there aren't words right now. But
I just hope that anybody listening to this podcast that will hear that, and just if they don't hear anything else, hear what you just said. There's optimism and hope by just showing up and being with that self energy. That's all you got to do. Nothing else.
Yep. Simple, but it sure as hell ain't easy.
Yeah, right. Easier said than done, for sure.
Yeah, 50 years of hard work, and you can do it sometimes.
2 years of hard work sometimes.
Well, that's also hopeful too, right? Because like you said earlier, we're all fighting this internal civil war, and even after decades and decades of work, we're still working on it. So it's true. It's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
I want another thing to just on the optimism front.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've studied primarily people who are suffering immensely come to me, and I had one big case with the UB. And I wanted to pretend it hadn't happened, but the lady said, "You've changed my life." And that before, whenever she talked about this, she'd been locked up, given electroshock and horrible drugs. I was the first human to ever believe her, and I had changed her life. And when she said that, I went, oh, shit, I can't ignore this now. It's like, no, you'd like to pretend this didn't happen, and I followed that woman for some 15 years, and she did flower and blossom, both inside and out. The people who come to me, it's primarily these negative spirits, the bad guys, the negs, as one person calls them. The feeders is another one, because very often they're parasites who feed off our negative emotions. And that comes up a lot in horror movies. This psychic parasites. Mind parasites idea.
In fact, I did a whole podcast on a movie that came out last year called It Feeds. It was exactly that. It was about this psychotherapist who works with a client because they have a feeder energy attached to them. So And I told everybody Bob would hate the ending of this because the person goes in there and beats it away, basically.
As long as they got it out, that's good news.
Yeah.
Well, what I want to say is the vast majority of spirit possessions, if you look at the anthropology worldwide, they're positive. People put incredible amounts of energy into developing and opening these connections to those realms and those beings. And the data is just too big. There's no way to quantify this, but my seat of the pants impression is the vast majority of these are positive, sought after, and cultivated. And I think there's another piece of evidence from the psychedelic world that's very, very convincing about this. You know, many people who take reasonably high dose psychedelics that contain DMT, which would include psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT itself, several other things. Many of them, about half of them in Roland Griffith's studies, met conscious agentic beings, aka spirits. In higher dose studies at the Imperial College in London, it was like 90%. They
Wow.
met conscious agentic beings who they would have conversations with. This was not what the researchers were looking for. It was incredibly upsetting. They were looking for
Yes.
some kind of Zen Satori, meditative thing. No, that's not. Anyway, Roland Griffiths did a huge online study. I think I did 2 of them with maybe 4 or 5,000 people. 80–90% of these contacts were positive. The descriptors checked were wise one, teacher, mother, mother earth, all kinds of wonderful stuff like that. Overwhelmingly positive. And people in psychedelic experiences do get the negative entities in there too. But, I also think this is very optimistic.
Absolutely. I've never had the opportunity, I will say, to use a psychedelic yet, but I have done breath work, which induces a psychedelic state. And I met a guide the very first time I ever did breath work. It was absolutely incredible. And then after that, I had an entity that chased me around for a little while, pretending to be that same guide, which was kind of strange. It eventually just kind of, fucked off, but it was a little weird. That was it showed up in therapy. It showed up with Jonah a couple times. But yeah, I think this is so interesting is that this is another topic that I think is not talked about a lot, but I am starting to see more opportunities for people to participate in psychedelic assisted therapy. And other cultures have been using psychedelics, ayahuasca, this is not new. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to the opportunity for incorporating psychedelics, which I think you touched on it for sure about opening, expanding the mind. And
Yeah. I've been involved with them since 1967. I continue in a much more distant way to be involved with them. I've had maybe 200 experiences myself and maybe sat with that many people. And I think they can be incredibly valuable. And I'm also very distressed and disappointed by the way modern therapists are working with them. Here I go. Again, this is not IFS. Don't blame this on Dick. Here's why it bothers me so much. In America, a supervised, licensed psilocybin session typically will cost $3,000, more or less.
Well,
Got it. Point made.
In Australia, it's even worse. I was on the advisory board for Mind Medicine Australia for a long time. We got MDMA and psilocybin legalized. Yay! But there's so many restrictions that the average therapy session costs $19,000 Australian.
unreal. Totally inaccessible.
Yeah. So if you look at the array of psychedelic sessions done, 2% are going to be done with all this bells and whistles and licensure and all that.
Yeah.
There'll be a bunch more done with underground providers. And many of these underground providers are way, way, way more skilled than the licensed people because they've been doing it. The vast majority will be done with nothing but maybe a friend.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of money going into education, certification, all sorts of crap for that 1 or 2%. That's so backwards, so wrong. We need to start developing educational materials for all the people who are doing it, friends sitting with friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody's putting any real money there. There are some signs of hope, and I have been working to put together training materials for underground providers and just friends sitting with friends. And there's this movement of psychedelic churches that I have a lot of hope for. But basically, the whole therapy end of the spectrum and it's so great, ketamine's legal. Yes, but
Thank you. This is just how out of touch I am with it. And sign me up whenever you get that course ready or those training materials ready.
The thought what came up is like part of what has always, not has always, but what has made me really feel like IFS is tapped in and aligned with something in a way that other modalities are not, is the fact that unlike kind of any other therapy modality, I feel like IFS works better with friends. Jamie being both a peer and a friend, we have incredible IFS sessions, but I think about just random friends who are also just kind of imaginative kind of almost psychonauts like myself are like, they're ready to go there. And like the stuff we get into with my friends is like so quick, so fast. And the way I can like sort of the array of what self energy can look like in a friend relationship is so much wider than it seems like in a therapeutic relationship. I can be like, hey, bud, not now, fuck off. Love you. And you can in a friend session in a way it's like, thanks, man. I can be loved.
yeah, totally. No, early on in the IFS world, when I got involved, it was much more open to that kind of stuff. And there was very much the spirit of this is really a way of life. It's not a therapy system.
Mhm.
This is how the mind is structured. And by the way, there's all sorts of evidence that any intelligent system of a certain degree of complexity has to be structured this way with largely encapsulated subroutines that are sparsely interlinked. And that, there's philosophers and mathematicians. There's all this crap to prove that. But so it changes the way people can live with each other. But one of the things I don't like about what's going on in the IFS world, the Institute now is doing all this stuff to make it therapists only and professionals only, and I think that's just 100% in the wrong direction. I think what you're saying, and Dick used to say, I don't know if he still does, often the best people are the people who don't have any therapy training at all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the therapists have to unlearn so much garbage that was crammed down their throat in grad school.
I actually I was like, do I want to ask Bob this question? I don't know if I want to ask Bob this question, but I think I'm going to try to frame it. I am not.
Ask it in the harshest, most confrontive way you can.
Okay.
See if you can really stump me.
Okay. Is IFS become a cult?
Great question. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
It's a very interesting. Well, what's the definition of a cult? And
That's exactly what Jonah said.
The way this is mostly talked about, cults are high control systems.
Yeah.
And I think there's some aspects of IFS that are really ugly now. And one of the reasons I think it's gotten bad is because there's a lot of money in it.
Yeah.
It's become really popular. And if you put IFS, on your therapy thing, you get more clients and blah, 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 blah. And so there's a lot of control, top down. They've got all these different levels of stuff, and even they've got merit badges you can like put on your website. I mean, it's ridiculous. So I think there are elements of that, and I think the Institute tends to encourage that kind of behavior, and it really makes me sad. And I very much want to open these ideas up as much as possible.
I struggle a lot. Bob, thank you so much for allowing me to just ask that without dancing around it. I definitely have parts of me that like need to be, socially polite and shit.
Not with me, please.
Thank you. I feel those parts are like, thank you. We feel safe and open. So I know there's a lot of, I also, Jonah can attest to this as being my one supervisor. I get a lot of a tizzy in my part, different camps of parts that like want to follow the rules and that want to be this like underground rogue, therapist. And so some of those parts have held some guilt that I'm not formally IFS trained. Luckily, Jonah has been formally IFS trained, so I benefit from his wonderful training. But I've done a deep dive into a lot of this material too on my own, read your books, listen to every podcast out there that's ever been available from you and, IFS. And one question I wanted to ask you, but I had a part that was like, don't ask Bob that because you're not going to want the answer. It was like, is it ethical for me to be out there doing IFS with people being not formally trained? But I feel like you've answered it. So yeah, thank you.
And if you use the bigger name parts work, because at the beginning, I sort of spieled off half a dozen or something other parts work models, and many of which were more advanced than IFS in some ways. So I think totally. And by the way, the IFS Institute is the official big shot, therapist only, command and control central organization. However, they have gotten so much like that there are many other schools popping up that are offering very high quality trainings in IFS that I believe they're not the official Wazoo, but I think they're very, very good. There's one called ifsca.ca in Canada. There's another one, David Stern in Rhode Island offers trainings. And there was another one in the UK. I don't know if that one's going to keep going, but there are a lot of other schools offering trainings that are quite good. And they don't, and they're more about this is good for everybody. We don't want to, claim you have to have some kind of license to do this stuff.
Because you kind of gave the green light for challenging questions, so some of the thought that was coming up in my mind is like, in a lot of religious or spiritual traditions, a lot of these exorcism traditions, there is a lot of gatekeeping, right? And that there can be a lot of like, yeah, you need to do, like, you don't eat meat when you do this work. You need to do a decade of this. And so, like, make it make sense, Bob. You're saying,
okay, yeah,
we bring this to the people, but we also need to take 10 years.
Yep. Yep. And you need to donate $10,000 to the temple before we start. Okay, this is I think the issue of protection. These dark energies do destroy and kill people.
Yeah.
If people can't get a hold of them, it can absolutely destroy their lives and kill them, destroy them. So I'm laughing and I'm kind of goofy and I have 12-year-old parts, but this is also very, very serious. The classical way to protect yourself is to build some kind of circle around yourself, a magical circle or a defensive circle or whatever, a fortification, a citadel, whatever you want to call it. These things are sometimes necessary, but I don't think they're optimal at all. There's two primary reasons for this. Number one, they're defensive in nature. You are putting your precious life force into something that's primarily defensive in nature. This is never good. Might be necessary sometimes, but it's never like, oh, whoopee, I'm spending my life force defending myself.
I put it like that.
Yeah. Okay. There's another reason why this is not good. There's a sort of theorem of IFS, and this is mainline IFS. Protective parts, because we all have parts that are protective, tend to elicit from the environment around them whatever it is they fear the most. Like, have you ever noticed that your paranoid friends tend to get attacked on the street? Or, whatever you're really, really worried and scared about, you tend to run into more. And that seems to be some kind of psychological law. If you're constantly obsessed and obsessing about you'll be betrayed by your lover, it seems to somehow attract betrayal. Now that's a subject we could spend a whole hour and a half on right there. But if you accept this as well, maybe that's true, then if you're building all these defenses against negative entities, you're actually attracting them. You're
Yeah.
setting up a light and going, "Hey, come here, attack me. Woo-hoo, woo, come get me." So I don't like, sometimes I think these things are necessary, but they're not optimal. Here's what I think is optimal. Well, let me go a little bit. The spiritists in Brazil, who know a great deal about this, a lot, and are worth studying in detail, they like smoky quartz. I don't know if you can see, these are little smoky quartzes. I
Oh,
love
hello.
smoky quartz. And so I have a bunch of that around. And there are other things. There are these, I think they're called Rukshastra seeds from a tree in the Himalayas that they use in Nepal and Tibet to keep these. There's all kinds of stuff like that you can get. But I think the real answer, all these things are fear-based. You notice that? The circle around you is fear-based. Grabbing your special crystals is fear-based. So here's another way. You look inside yourself. You just you could do this now. Take a moment, look inside yourself, and notice the place within your body where life force originates. Usually people experience this as a spark of light somewhere low down in their stomach. Many people experience it as a warmth, or sometimes a vibration or a hum, even a sound. Now, if you're willing, just focus on this. And one of the rules of our inner life is as we focus on things, they get larger. They take up more of our awareness. Allowing this place of life force within you to expand and start filling your body. Notice everything in your body where there's a place of constriction or obstruction, or there might even be objects or beings that become visible to you as your body fills with this fundamental life force. And let that go everywhere throughout your body. Sometimes there are constrictions and people have a whole arm or a leg or area of their back where it can't go at all. Just notice this. Don't fight with it, please. And then when it's all the way to your skin as much as it can, let it go poof out around you to a couple feet, all the way around you. Fill this wonderful life force. Noticing any beings out there, any shadows or movements or whatever there is. And then when you're ready, take a few deep breaths and come on back to your more ordinary state of mind. And then I've done this very, very quickly. Usually this takes 20, 30 minutes. And then I would ask you to draw like outlines of a human body, like a gingerbread person, front and back, and then draw all the different things you noticed in your body, front and back, and in the space around you.
Mm.
Doing that creates a great map of your parts and of any unattached burdens or guides who are in the neighborhood, which is an incredibly valuable thing to do. But also when you're full of this life force pouring into you, you're pretty much impervious. And this is something that's good to do whether or not you're being attacked. It's not a defensive drain of energy, and it's not fear-based. It's love-based and life force-based. So I think this basic kind of way of staying safe dealing with this dark world is better. This is not an original idea with me. I got it from William Baldwin, who was a fascinating man, and I've modified it quite a bit. But I just want to give some credit to him.
So that all that preparation that like we do want to expect from spiritual traditions, while also holding a little room for maybe sometimes that preparation can also fall into fear based thinking itself. And so that thrust of preparation is gatekeeping. That's not the only way we can like pour in effort. We can also just keep connecting to that source and keep kind of growing that aperture, that orifice.
Yeah. And I think that, you could also, I'm not trying to discount spiritual preparation. I mean, I have a long practice, takes me hours every day. And so I'm not trying to say that's worthless or anything like that. But if it's fear-based and you're building defensive structures, might be necessary at some passages in your life, but it's less than optimal. How's that?
Thank you for that, Bob. I love that exercise, and it definitely even helped me in that moment to. I think even though it was quick, we're used to, or I'm speaking for myself, maybe to doing that. So that was like, ooh, that was nice. That was like a breath of fresh air. And I think that maybe from what I understand from Bridget, that question and your response is that other cultures and other spiritual practices are so good at connecting to their ancestors, which, can be spiritual guides and doing these practices to be able to relate and connect to them, that maybe there's crossover there with bringing in their ancestors, guides to help along with the self. And
Mm-hmm.
that's also like, that's an additional element. And so doing these spiritual practices to bridge that connection, make that connection, and using those guides to help with the process of meeting the fear, meeting the UVs, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I want to say one more thing about usually when I did that guided visualization that I did so quickly with you, first couple times I'll take 20, 30 minutes and then we'll make maps of the front and back of the body where all that stuff showed up. If you practice that a fair amount, which I think is a really wonderful spiritual discipline, it's also fun. You can do a version of it very, very quickly in a couple of breaths.
Mm-hmm.
That if you're working with a client who has these dark spirits all over them, you can just fill yourself with that in a few breaths so that it becomes a pretty much real-time way you can create safety for yourself, even in dealing with the really, really, really heavily infested people. So I think there's lots of reasons why I think that's a very, very valuable, I don't know what to call it, resource, tool,
Yeah.
thing.
It's an internal it's a resource. I
Mhm.
think. Um, do you mind if I ask Jonah what showed up for you when you did that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I definitely noticed the places where it couldn't go in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways, which felt, um, you got parts that get disappointed, right? That like, oh, can't receive spirit right now. Um, that's why we kind of oftentimes in those guided meditations offer that sort of, and hey, yeah, and this is where it can go too.
Well, let me make a suggestion if I can. Don't try and fight those places where it can't go. Enter into a dialogue with them, a respectful dialogue. Hi, hello, good to meet you. I'm kind of surprised you're here. I'd like to get to know you better. And if you have parts who are scared or angry at them, ask all those parts to step back and give you the room to approach it with compassion and real curiosity.
Yeah, like as you're talking, I'm having that thought of, oh yeah, self kind of remembering, right? We can say, oh hey, I didn't notice there was a wall here, right? I guess I haven't walked through the house. I don't remember this part of the house, but oh, I didn't expect there to be a wall here, but hi wall.
Mm-hmm.
All
We're
right.
here.
That makes me think of something else I think is super important. There is no such thing as a blank wall in the psyche.
Mm.
People will go, oh, I'm blank. There's nothing here. Nope. That's a failure of curiosity. That is not a psychic reality. You can start asking questions like, it's blank? Is it black blank, white blank, orange blank? What color is it?
Mm-hmm.
Is the blankness go all the way up to the heavens, all the way down to the earth? Oh, what earth does it hit?
Yeah.
Does it have a texture? Is it rough or smooth or like a cloud? Or do you smell anything if you get close to it?
Yeah.
It's a failure of curiosity when we think we're nothing in here, closed. No, that's never true. It's just like it's never true. You cannot hold your body still.
Mm-hmm.
People go, oh, no, your body's always moving.
Yeah.
Always. And very often, I think psychologically, psycho-spiritually, the most important movements your body makes are the micro movements that are so subtle you're prone to miss them.
Mm-hmm.
That an incredible amount can be learned by opening our sensorium to the micro movements and these areas of our psyche where we're, oh, it's just a wall there, nothing to see here. You know.
I think that I've heard you say this before, put it this way, but a lot of the work that we're doing is helping ourselves and others work on our attune our interoception, this perception that we don't use. And within this inner world, this inner experience, I mean, we not only are we building this intimacy with ourselves, our parts, but again, this, we're all connected. You're also tapping into this collective consciousness. You're also connecting with others in this really just vast way. One of the things that I wrote down from your book Spirit, that Spirit told you, was that there's realms upon realms that we can't even fathom. And that just, like, I think I just cried when I read that. That's another, when I can't fathom something, I cry. I'm just like, what? It's just amazing. The opportunities are just endless. And it's like to develop this interoception by getting curious.
Yeah. And, there's studies now about interoception, also called inner sense cultivation. Poor interoception skills correlate with all sorts of stuff. Eating disorders, 99+% of the time, have poor interoception skills. Treatment-resistant depression, poor interoception skills. Borderline personality disorder, which I don't think most of these diagnoses are real, but this is the kind of statistical studies they do. Poor interoception skills. And the good news is it's trainable, and it's pan-diagnostically effective. You don't have to know what a person's problem is. You can help train them in interoception, and they'll start functioning a little better, overwhelmingly so.
Again, there's that optimism, there's that hope. I have a part that was showing up right before, you probably just saw her, a part that showed up right before this interview. I call her my Kristen Wiig part. She's like, she's just like really big, really excited, just very excited about talking to you and having this interview. So she wants to know, I'm taking this a little bit of a left-hand turn because this is a Exorcist Within horror podcast. I've often heard you describe some of the UBs, some of the critters that you've met. Can you share a little bit about that?
Okay, I'll talk about this, because these are very often associated with physical illness.
Oh.
This is something else Dick doesn't like talking about, because if he said, Bob, if you start talking about that this helps physical illness, they're going to call us a bunch of quacks. Well, quack, 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 quack.
Dick's not here.
But this is Bob. This isn't IFS mainstream. Okay. I was told I was going blind more than 10 years ago. And I have several macular problems with the macula, the back of my eyeball. And actually, Dick was the therapist. We started working on this with IFS. And as we looked into my left eye is the worst eye, what I saw was something that looked like a spider with the tail of a scorpion stinging the back of my eyeball. And the symptoms of my eye disease were there would be blisters form on the back of my eyeball, which would then swell up, which really distorts vision. And if they burst and fill the eye with blood, you go blind. So it fit the physical diagnosis really well. We were able to approach this thing, get to know it. It was from my mother, who was really, I think the word is evil, but we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. Very destructive to me. And we were able to get this thing out. I'm doing way, way, way better than the doctors thought was possible. I can still read, I can still drive. I do also get the Western medical treatments, which involve routine, regular injections directly into my eyeball. Hey, I can see, I can read. And that was a pretty scary looking insectoid being.
I don't know if anybody could even write that. That's horrifying.
Well, good. Your movie fans will like it.
Yeah.
So that's, well, again, with that kind of trying to tie it in energy, it made me think that, like, maybe horror movies are maybe the space in our society where these shadow things can kind of be most safely or consistently externalized.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, or even talked about. I mean, novelists, people who write fiction, movie makers. I'm talking to this one guy, and we're talking about making a film of some of the really horrible creatures I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll be a short.
Yeah. Come back to the podcast when you do that, Bob, because this is perfect medium for that. But yeah, I mean, I've heard you talk about, the bloodshot eyeball that wanted to destroy the world and your client, and just really, really, really scary things. And then things that try to come in disguised as benign guides,
Oh, yeah.
and it's a whole
Yeah.
spectrum of things.
C.S. Lewis wrote a book, I don't know, almost 100 years ago now, probably, called The Screw Tape Letters.
Yeah.
And the premise of this book was Screwtape was a senior devil off the planet who was writing letters to advise this junior devil who's down here on the planet on how to fuck people up. And it's sort of an old-fashioned book, but the premise is really interesting. And it got me thinking, if I was one of these insectoid, parasite, feeder kind of spirits, what would I tell people? What would I tell my agents down there on the planet to do to mess with people? Who would you want to infiltrate the most? Well, obviously, power structures, domination, but spiritual leaders, you want to poison them.
Yeah.
Parents, and then just looking at it, there's a book called The Propagation of Evil, how evil, reproduces and gets such a big place in our. I'm not so sure that one's worth reading. I see you might be writing down the title. Basic idea is really valuable, I think.
Yeah.
So it's it's an interesting point of view. And yeah, a lot of times if you just try and tell the truth straight up, people just, blow you away. But if you tell it as fiction or as a horror movie, people can sort of let it in that way without their critical censors coming up and shutting everything down.
Absolutely. And that's what I try to make. That's exactly what really the goal of this podcast is just to do that. Is like, how is this real? How does this really impact us? How is horror telling our stories? And so that's why I love the genre. It's a very underappreciated one. We are coming down on time, Bob, and so I do kind of want to move towards wrapping up. But there is something that I ask all my guests that come on this podcast. It's my little podcast catchphrase, and the question usually goes like this: is what demons have you exorcised by coming on this podcast or by watching whatever movie we watched? And so I guess you can interpret that question however you like. What has this experience been like for you today?
Well, I've enjoyed the two of you and interacting with you. I don't think I got any demons out today. I hardly ever watch films, as I said.
Yeah.
But, for the past 15 years, I've been sort of a guy in the IFS world who therapists bring their clients with these kinds of issues to, because most therapists don't want to have anything to do with this. So I get a lot of experience. There are hundreds and hundreds of people I've helped get beings like this out of them.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems so weird and unusual to most people, but to me, it's sort of like, hey, this is what I do.
Yeah. Well, Bob, if with that being said, if say I wanted to have you help me with a client, is that something that you do? Like, do you do work like contend and with
That's
people?
mainly what I do is the therapist brings a client they're stuck with, and I do a session with the client while the therapist watches. And I do occasionally see a person once or twice if they have good support going on in their own world. But mostly I do small supervision groups for therapists, and I've got several more books. I'm working on, some trainings. So I'm more trying to work in that area because I'm 77 and I'm very aware of the pressures of time on me. I have a lot of creative projects I'm really eager to complete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of folks who I immerse within the horror community feel like outsiders, right? Because we're interested in the weird and the occult, and people think we're weird or something's messed up with us about that. Yeah. Welcome to the Outsiders Club here at The Exorcist Within, because you fit right in. And it's just been so lovely. And is there anything else, Jonah?
Well, I guess as we were talking about thinking about this end, I had this thought of like, okay, and I know you've mentioned this that UBs used to be called critters in the IFS landscape, which for me has this really powerful empathetic quality to it. Right. When you think of them as like, oh yes, they're scuttling in the corners, but what scuttles in the corners is what's not welcome in the light, right? I don't know. I had this thought of like if you were to the UBs that are listening, because there are UBs out there listening, is there any kind of last words you want to say for them, to the critters out there that are listening?
Yeah, I've got a couple things I'd like to close with. There's nothing you ever could have done that is so horrible that you won't be welcomed back to your home, to the light, to a place where you can heal. There is nothing like that. You will be welcomed back again. And we know it takes a great deal of courage to make this transition and to do that. And there's a lot of more and more people here who are ready to help you do that kind of transition. Don't lose hope. You can do that.
Very powerful message. There's always hope.
Let me say a couple other things and then I got to run. Outside. Sure. Colin Wilson, a long time ago, wrote a wonderful book called The Outsiders. And basically he shows that all the most creative people are outsiders. The insiders can't compare.
You hear that, everybody?
I just want to throw that out there for your audience. One other thing, critics. We don't want to fight with critics or argue with them or banish them. That's all a huge mistake, I think, for people who do stuff like me. What we need to do is invite them in and remind them that all investigations have two phases. There's data collection and there's analysis. If we start the analysis too soon, the analysis is garbage and it messes up the data collection. In this area, we are in data collection. All the critics out there, please help us with data collection. We need your intelligence. We need your clarity. Let's work together.
Please ask the hard questions. Yeah. Bring the skepticism. I love it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like you said. Yes, sir. Oh,
how's KW doing?
KW is like, woo! We did it! We didn't panic! And in fact, he gave me permission to freak out. Man, what demons did you exercise, Jonah? Or if you want, I can go first. You need to think about it.
Sure, yeah.
I'm locked. Oh man, I gotta tell you what, I feel like I exercise the shit out of some demons of like pessimism, like that I don't know, sometimes I get to this, I just feel like he just filled me with so much hope and just joy. God, his self energy is just so strong.
So yeah,
every time I've seen him present on like a podcast, like live in a thing or like a podcast, he moves me. But like in person, like, oh man, it's infectious. Talking about just how we can impact each other and change the world and how easy it is, though hard, but like, just really the simple things we can do to just show up with love and curiosity and just change the world. That just filled me with so much hope and optimism. So goodbye, demons of pessimism.
Yeah, totally. So when I did the training with Leanne Campbell, which, I've mentioned, Leanne Campbell's an emotionally focused therapist, and she similarly just really seems to like walk the walk in a moment-to-moment way. We were coming up against this moment a lot of times of like, we can't do what you do in the therapy room, Leanne. And we were able to get at what the bridge was. The bridge for her was this deep faith in the healing power that's inside all of us implicitly all the time. This sort of moment where like she doesn't panic because she no longer ever doubts whether or not that's in someone, whether or not that there is the power for them to heal. And so she just doesn't panic in all these moments that we might panic, right? She's like, okay, I thought the door was here. There's no moment where she goes, there's no door. And that he similarly had that same sort of like, he's let all these experiences of helping people affect him to like, he just doesn't have that belief isn't in there. There is no part of him that goes, maybe there isn't a door, maybe there isn't a healing, maybe that.
Yeah, just like this endless eternal optimism that like there's, even at the end when he was like, what do you want to say to the UBs listening that are running our fucking government? I don't know. I think part of me is like, I expected him to say, fuck you, we're coming for you or something, which is dumb. Like I knew he wasn't going to say that, but I think it was a part of me that thought that. But
what he did. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's like there's hope for you. There's nothing that you've done so bad that you can't move on to the light. I was like,
I know there's nothing so horrible that you've done that there isn't a home to accept you back into, or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
That there's a place for you no matter what. No bad beings, in a way, whether or not it's like, doing evil, right? Uh, there's just still a place. There's still
it just lost.
lost.
Hmm. Man, that was incredible. I meant to ask that one of the things I wanted to ask him. I was like, I don't know if he would like this, but what I wanted to say is, like, we have a real exorcist. Like, we have a real life exorcist. Like, because I think so, because he's talking about driving out evil spirits and spirit possession. So, like, yeah, we just had a podcast with a real life exorcist on the exorcist. That
That was awesome.
was incredible. Thanks, Jonah. I could not have done this without you. Literally, could not.
I mean, it could be helpful. I definitely had, the first half hour was sort of like, shit, I don't know how I'm supposed to be here. I know we just went over it and I was grounded, and then he showed up and I was like, a lot of my self-energy was gone.
Yeah.
When he showed up. I don't know if you had a similar experience.
My podcaster part showed up. It was like, I'm a host. Jamie showed up for sure.
Do you remember the moment for you when, because I think I remember the first two big responses you did. I was like, part of me wanted to like touch your back and be like, but then I was like, oh man, I don't know. Then I have my doubt of like, I don't want to send a message that you're fucking up. So I don't want to see, which, even though that was just the permission you just given me. But then I noticed the third response, I felt way more of your presence. And I'm wondering if you remember the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think whenever, because I'm hyper vigilant as fuck and I like read people, and like I think like noticing him kind of shuffling around and like just kind of showing up, and I was like, I don't know, like I was definitely in like podcast mode, but I think the more he kind of showed up and like he told his story, and like I think you said something about maybe not necessarily when you were terrified, but it was like, yeah, I'll tell you about it. I don't know. I think that sort of gave my parts permission to like show up, like he's showing up authentically, and then he's telling us we can be authentic, and then I don't know, something about that permissiveness and like seeing other authenticity moments happen. I didn't think he was at first, but like I was just definitely like watching. It's like, how's he showing up? Like,
is this sort of explicit permission kind of thing that, and I think that this is a sort of unspoken secret connection between you and me, actually. We really are like somebody give me permission.
Yes.
Like, and I can't do it unless I hear some explicit kind of permission. And that's the way, that's going to be one of our biggest sort of holding each other back, but also I think the way that we vibed and resonated. When we see other people in the world who don't do that, we're like,
yeah, absolutely.
It's gonna be hard to relate when, I don't know, we just both have that. Show me what the explicit permission is for me to be you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we're good at giving each other that too. And like knowing that we both need that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much power in that, for sure. That explicit permission, for sure.
When I'm kind of in like that like partial de-escalated place, I can go, hey, this is the moment where I need explicit permission for me to leave. I know we're fighting, but I need to be somewhere. And I've got this prior commitment. Can you give me permission to leave?
Yeah.
And I need to ask explicitly, because there's this weird hang up of like, if somehow some part of me is like, you haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Feeling resonates so deeply with me, for sure. Even Bob talking about, he said all these, this could be a whole other hour and a half. Like, hey, come back. Kind of like laws of attraction between like what you put in the world and come out. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's another like our part, because like we do know each other's internal landscape so well. It's like, yeah, I know what you mean, because your part is going to immediately clock whenever my parts are showing up, and like as I have an agenda. I've got clients like that too.
Right now it's actually kind of great for you, even when a client gets explicit about that, because you've kind of exiled your own need for permission.
Yes.
As we're talking right now, you're like, yeah, I know I need permission, but actually there are lots of moments where you're like, what do I need? And like, you're not, it's hard to access that, like in your super front conscious of like, oh wait, actually what I want is permission, because maybe it's not so cool to be a person who needs permission. Like,
Right? Like, that's against, like, what? I'm a dependent world, independent baddies, you know? What you mean? Totally.
Right.
Absolutely.
so it's maybe shadow work for both of us.
Absolutely.
You want to do a quick check-in for your side?
Yeah. I know there's a part of me that's, like, showing up right now. How are you doing? Like, how's your physicals? We've been sitting down this whole time.
Incredible. I have not sat in a chair in years that has felt as comfortable as this chair.
You're taking that chair with you. Like, you're not gonna argue with me. You're just gonna take that chair with you. I have plenty of other chairs. You're taking that chair with you?
Okay. Oh, nicely done, nicely done.
You're taking that chair
Pushing
with you?
past my love it.
You're taking that chair with you today.
Thank you. So my body's doing great.
Okay.
I think I realized, to get explicit, that like what I was just hoping for was genuine connection,
Yeah.
and for him to feel excited, and for him to go some places that he doesn't go in other podcasts. And I'm like, I don't think this was just a copy. And sometimes I'm like, that whole hour sounded exactly like another hour I've seen you do. And this one didn't feel like that.
Yeah. I gotta be honest. When I kind of heard him starting to regurgitate some of those,
Yeah.
I don't mean it like that. Because not that I think he's being fake, but I think that he's probably used to, like we talked about, like introducing a lot of this material to people
Right.
for the first time. I'm like, no, like,
Yeah,
I
no
just,
cans,
no
please.
cans, please. Like, I
Yeah.
started like heard him go to the canned speeches. I was like, no, redirect.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I feel super, super awesome about that. And also in that kind of like, I could keep going kind of.
I know. And I think you might have touched a part of Bob Falconer that's feeling a little bit outsider, you know, like, with Dick, that's got a little pain there. That was an interesting moment.
Yes, I thought that was interesting too, of like, maybe people don't ever push him on that.
Yeah, I've never heard that. And I'm like, anything that's available publicly, at least I've listened to.
Right, he's like, we're distant now.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Yeah.
And like, we're in a new normal, but we're not the way we were.
Yeah, that's sad. And I know I felt a lot of empathy in that moment. And there's a big part of me that's like, oh, I want to like be more curious about that. But also,
Yeah.
we actually don't have, I don't know. I was like, we don't have that relationship yet. Come back.
Totally. Yeah. So yeah. I feel awesome. I feel so grateful. I feel charged for the rest of my day. I'm seeing Marion tonight, actually.
I'm seeing Mary in the morning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so when she got the shout out, I had something in me was like, something earlier today was just like, I hope we give Marion a shout out today. And then you did.
No way. It's like a kid. Yeah, I immediately thought of them.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been in sync. We've been in sync these past few hours.
I tell you what.
I think the one thing that like was hanging is I realized that when the work that we did last time, right, where you kind of showed up for this existential fear that I have that kind of relates to connection, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what actually, right after I left that, I realized it's the porosity. That's the fear. And so like
afraid of the porosity?
Yeah. And so and I think it comes a lot around, it can often come up around eye contact and sort of like, you know, I've had moments with you before where I'm like, we're really connected right now. Like, I'm vibrating too hard. This is, I can make it go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what I'm realizing is sometimes there's just parts of me that are like, if I let in anyone, even my most favorite person, like, this fear that like some parts of mine will disappear and never come back or something like that, or annihilated, or like
it'll take over. Disintegrate's the word.
Mm-hmm. This is part of the demon I'm starting to exercise from doing this podcast, is this sort of like, the answer is not to stop to put up a wall. The answer is for me to tap more back into my source connection, right? So instead of being like, don't look at me, to be like, stay looking, I'm going to tap my spine back into like the world well.
Yeah.
Just noticing like somatically, like I'm feeling much more comfortable with this eye contact right now than even some other eye contacts.
Yeah.
So
I know, I'm like so relaxed. That's incredible. Yeah. So this idea that the porosity of mind, I know we didn't talk about it a whole lot because that normally is something he does talk a lot, is that our minds are not this skull where nothing can, our beings are not this closed off citadel, being the opposite thing where nothing can come in and out of. But like, if you human connection is being porous, just like any other organic thing is like, we're connected. And
Mm.
if you allow that to flow, then that's perfectly natural and normal. But
Yeah.
a lot of our parts aren't, and it sounds like there's parts of you that are deeply afraid of that because that feeling is foreign or it's not natural or is that right?
There's a little foreign, there's a little unnatural, there's a little bit of fear around what that porosity, like, I think that in some ways, like, my parents needed a certain kind of porosity. I think my
Mm.
porosity and boundarylessness is somehow they exercise some of their lack of belonging in their life, and they're being bullied.
It was taken advantage of.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think that that's a good way to describe it as taking it. I think it's just one of those moments, right? Like, just like you say, like, you focus on the fear, that's what you attract. And I'm realizing just it is this sort of moment where my parts are so like looking at whatever's in front of me that they don't even like be like, wait, well, what's behind me? What's behind me?
Mhm.
And I look back and it's like my inner landscape is maybe a little lovelier than I realized. Sort of
Ah,
in this view, there's maybe like more desert and scrub and then whatever's coming at me. But I look behind and I'm like, wait, there's some river and trees and there is that sort of like you could go into the valley and find the well,
there's so much beauty. Yeah.
and that like it's not about being like, it's about being like, ooh, I'm feeling afraid. Let me just tap back. And that's it. It's not it that way.
It can be a both. You're capable of reaching in all directions
Yeah. Yeah,
because you
totally.
are. You're capable.
So yeah, I think that was my demon that I exercised
Hmm.
to get back around to that first question.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you, Donna.